Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. For those who are online in person, those who are watching later. This week's parsha is called Shelach Lecha, which begins in Numbers chapter 13 and verse 1 and goes to Numbers chapter 15, verse 41. And so this is the fourth portion in the book of Bamidbar or Numbers. And it is the 37th parasha of the year. And so Shelach Lecha is, like I said, the name of this portion. And it covers the sending out of the spies. It covers the punishment for breaking Shabbat. It talks about the offerings, and it also talks about the wearing of tzitzits. So we're going to go to Numbers chapter 13, verse 1 to get started. So Numbers 13:1. It says, Yah says to Moshe, send men on your behalf to spy out the land of Canaan, which I'm giving to the people of Israel. From each ancestral tribe, send someone who is a leader in his tribe. Moshe dispatched them from Paran Desert as Yah had ordered. All of them were leading men among the people of Israel. So like I said, the name of this portion is Shelach Lecha, and it actually comes from that verse, actually verse 2, which says send. Okay. It's often translated as send. And Shelach really means to, like to send out, or to extend, but it comes from that root shalach, but it also means to infer like you're putting your hand to something or to force something by your hand. And it's often used to describe a messenger. And in English, we see it says that those that are being sent are going to spy out the land. And so those spies are actually acting as messengers. And if you think about a messenger is not saying their own words. They're relaying the words of the one that sent them. But not only is this says Shelach, but it says Shelach Lecha, which Lecha is translated for yourself. So it infers that this is for your best interest. It's for your good and for your benefit. So, if you notice what we read there, who's telling them to go out? Yeah, right here it's 13. It says that Yah is. Okay, so let's hold your place there and let's go over to the book of Deuteronomy. In Deuteronomy chapter 1. Deuteronomy chapter 1, and we're going to go to verse 21. Okay. It says, look, Yah your Elohim has placed the land before you. Go up and take possession as Yah, the Elohim of your ancestors, has told you. Don't be afraid. Don't be dismayed. You approached me, every one of you, and said, let us send men ahead of us to explore the country for us and bring back word concerning what route we should use in going up and in what cities we will encounter alike. And the idea seemed good to me, so I took 12 of your men, one from each tribe. So did you notice a difference? What was the difference?
12 men in the tribe.
Well, they were sending 12 from the other. But what was the difference here? Who was doing the sending? Yeah, it says here. Yeah, Yah says, Moses is saying, you approached me.
Oh, okay.
Talking about the children of Israel.
Oh,
And every one of you said, let us send men. And, the idea seemed good to me. So I took 12 men. Yeah. But in Numbers, we just read, it says that Yah did. So it's, which one is it? Did Moshe send them or did Yah send them out? Which one, really?
yeah.
And then when it seems like there's a contradiction, because both of these are in Torah, Numbers is Torah and Deuteronomy is Torah. If it comes to there's like a conflict within Torah, I tend to hold with Deuteronomy. Why? Because Deuteronomy is the only book that is written in the first person, and it is in Moshe's own words. And I believe, technically, I believe that the other books of the were probably written by a scribe. But some scholars say that actually what we just read in Numbers 13, where Yah's saying to send them out, that this happens after Numbers chapter 21, that it's not written in numerical or not written in chronological order, and that Israel's victory over the king of Arad had already taken place. And as a result, the children of Israel felt like they could go ahead and take the land. And they brought the idea to Moses, and then Moses, took it to Yah, and Yah says, okay, you send them for yourself, but I already told you you could do it, but you go ahead and send them for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's already told them he's given them the land, but it's, it's not necessarily Yah sending.
That, verse 21 says right there, he's claiming it. You heard him set the land before you.
Mm-hmm.
Go up and take possession.
Yeah.
And Moshe was telling the people that Yah's already given them the land, they need to go up and take it.
Right. Yeah. Jack was just saying that, Moses there, he says that Yah's already given them the land to go up and take possession of it. So really, they're both right. They don't really have a conflict with each other. It's if you think there's a conflict, I tend to hold with Deuteronomy. But, with that one, it was more or less that, if it's true that Numbers 21 happens after that, then it was the people's idea. But then y'all's just saying, okay, yeah, I already told you you could take it, but you go ahead and look for yourself.
I don't think it's the way people interpret those two.
Yeah, it's the way it's interpreted. Yeah. Now, the word there for spy and Numbers 13:2, that the men are sent out to spy or reconnoiter. This word in Hebrew is bayataru, which is, it can mean spy, but it also means the root of it, tour, which means to tour, which is interesting. It's sort of ironic that our English word tour is tour. But it really means to tour and explore the land. So they were to go into the land to be tourists in the land, because Yah had already told them that this land was theirs. So in a way, they're going and touring and seeing, oh, this is what we're going to get. This is all the, yeah.
And you've never been this way before.
Yeah.
So I want you to go this way.
Yeah, he's taking them through, and he's like showing them all the good that Yah is giving them. And, some have interpreted it as more of along the lines of, yeah, they were going to tour it, but they were also going with the mindset of, okay, Yah's telling us this is our land, so how are we going to take the land? So strategically thinking, okay, I'm looking it over in order to conquer it, because Yah's telling us ours. And when you look at that,
Most of them have never been out of Egypt.
yeah, a lot, they have been out of Egypt. Yeah.
A lot of years.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not saying anything where they were.
They're going to have to fight. Yeah. Because you think about when the children of Israel came out of Egypt, okay, they came out, they were slaves. They come to the Red Sea. Did they have to fight Pharaoh? No. Yah did the fight. Yah did that. So they didn't. Yeah. Right. And then so now here they are, and this is still within the first year, and they come up and they're at the edge of the promised land, and they're, thinking, okay, well, we're going to go in. And if this battle is, if he's already done this battle with Arad, and that was a miracle in itself, then here they've not had to really do anything for themselves because their clothes grew with them. Their food was provided, even though everything, their shoes never wore out. Everything's really,
Stores.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there weren't stores for them to go get stuff. So everything was really given to them. And now this is really the first time that they're going up and they're seeing the land. Well, that word, here in Hebrew, vayaturu, it is also used in chapter 13, verse 21, where it says, and they went up and they searched the land from the wilderness of Zin to Rehob, and all the men came to Hamath. So again, it's used in that verse. But what's interesting is that, remember, on a Torah scroll, there are no nikodot. There are no vowel pointings. Okay. So when I did a search on this word, vayaturu, if you look at it without the vowel pointings, it is spelled in Hebrew, Vav, Yud, Tav, Resh, Vav. Okay. Vav, Yud, Tav, Resh, Vav. And when you search on that word, I found that word somewhere else. Okay. So let's go to Isaiah 44 and verse 19.
I thought it was interesting too, that from two of the tribes that Moshe chose Judah, Caleb.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one was Ephraim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the two were Ephraim and Judah.
And that's the two tribes.
That brought back the good report. Yeah.
Two tribes.
Okay, Isaiah 44 and verse 19. No one thinks to himself or has the knowledge or the discernment to say, I burned half of it in the fire, baked bread on its coals, roasted meat, and ate it. Should I now make the rest an abomination? Should I prostrate myself to a tree trunk? So that word, vayaturu, which is to search or to spy out, without the vowel pointings, is also found in that verse. Because remember, on a Torah scroll, they would know which vowel pointings to put in there. And sometimes Yah does it for, it can have multiple meanings. And it seems like it's odd in this verse, but where it says, should I now make the rest an abomination? That word rest is actually the word vayitro. Okay, vayitro. And it's from that root, yater, where we get, Yethro's name, Jethro, Moses' father-in-law. Okay. And yater means remnant or excess. So this word vayitro can also be read va, and yeter is a remnant, and putting the O on the end of it makes it his and his remnant. So think about what's the connection here. That word to spy out and the word vayitro, which can also be and his remnant. Well, what was his remnant supposed to do? They were going into the land and spying out the land. They were there to see the good that Yah is giving his people. So, and it was interesting because, like I said, when you're reading it on a Torah scroll, you can read that both ways. And it's spelled exactly the same. It's just that the only difference between vayitro and vayaturu is the fact that you don't have the vowel pointings. And when you look at how it's spelled, the vav at the end on to spy out, the dot is put beside it. And in Isaiah, the dot is put above it. Because the beside the vav makes it a U sound, and above it makes it an O. So that's the only difference there. So we go back to Numbers 13. These men, they were all leaders of the tribes. And so these are people that the others would look up to. And we know, of course, that, if we, look at verses 4 through 16, that there were, one from each tribe, except for Levi here. So we have both Manasseh and Ephraim listed. And that we see that they were, men of renown. They were the heads of their tribes. There were 12 that were sent out. We know 10 brought back the negative report. Go down to verse 25.
On that report,
Mhm.
What occurred to me when I was reading it was they mixed the good
With the, yeah,
with the
Yeah.
bad. And they should have just kept their eyes on what they saw was so good that God had already said that the lamb was theirs, and not even thought about how, the spy.
Right.
Not spy, but the man there.
yeah. She was just saying that, with their report, they mixed the truth
Yeah.
with the bad here. And so they should have just kept their eyes on the land instead of looking at the men. Okay, Numbers 13:25. 40 days later, they returned from spying the land, and they went to Moshe, Aaron, and the entire community, the people of Israel, at Kadesh and Paran Desert, where they brought back word to them and to the entire community and showed them the fruit of the land. And what they told them was this: we entered the land where you sent us, and indeed it does flow with milk and honey, and here are its fruit. However, the people living in the land are fierce, and the cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, we saw the Anakim there. Amalek lives in the area of the Negev. The Hittite, the Yebusi, the Emori live in the hills, and the Canaani live by the sea along the Jordan. And Caleb silenced the people around Moshe and said, we ought to go up immediately and take possession of it. There's no question that we can conquer it. But the men who had gone with him said, we can't attack those people because they are stronger than we are. And they spread a negative report about the land that they had spied for the people of Israel by saying, the land we passed through in order to spy it out is a land that it devours its inhabitants. All of the people we saw there were giants. We saw the Nephilim, the descendants of Anak, who were from the Nephilim. To ourselves, we look like grasshoppers by comparison, and we look that way to them too. Now, so as we look at what they're saying here, we often miss what's happening. Yes, they're bringing back an evil report, but this was Lashon Hara. This was evil speech.
Mm-hmm.
But against what?
To me, it's against the word of God, because God said they could go on.
Yeah, it's against the word, because Yah says he could take it, but it's also against the land. They're criticizing the land.
God knew everything. They've seen God do all these things, and yeah, they just didn't believe.
Yeah,
they believed with the fruit and all that they got was big and money. But
yeah, they believe part of it, but you're basically, like criticizing God because this is what he already said that they could do.
Is that the way the same was
this
they were talking about
Yeah,
before?
yes,
That was the same one?
Yeah.
Same Nephilim?
yes. The Anakim are supposedly descendants of the Nephilim, and then the whole story then of how did they survive the flood? The story there goes is that Ham's wife on the ship had the DNA. That's one theory, is that Ham's wife had the DNA, and that's why they're Ham's wife from Noah's.
Because God held their womb until they knowing him.
Yeah, but they're saying that her
Wonder, when they make these statements, how they prove that.
Yeah, I know, that's what I wonder.
I mean, do they say?
I don't know.
Well,
He's just asking when
they
people
see
make
it,
these
so-
statements about like how do they prove that, and I think a lot of that comes from the book of Enoch,
And it might be
and
true.
it comes from the book of Enoch.
But then again, I mean,
It could be. And then my thing too would think about is, okay, well, if that was true, then if Yah was destroying the earth because of the corrupted seed,
Right.
then why would he let a corrupted seed be on the ship?
And so
so
More than likely, it had to be like, when the spies went in the land,
Mhm.
and then with the harlot that saved them,
Mhm.
she wasn't holy or good in it, but because what she did, her family was
Yeah.
blessed.
Eddie was just
So-
saying that, it could be that, the fact that you think about when they go into the land and Rahab, that she wasn't good, that,
No.
here she was, but because of the fact that of what she did, her family was saved, which is a possibility. Was blessed. It could be. I don't know. Yeah.
Remember, even when you're not of God, when you do something good, when you go out and help the poor, the widows, you get blessed.
Yeah.
too.
Eddie was just saying too. Could you hear him?
Yeah.
Okay, you could hear him. Okay, so I won't repeat it.
Even though you're the son of God or daughter of God.
Yeah.
Do
So
you think though that the giants to them, I mean, probably everybody was either 5'7", the men to 6 foot tall,
Mhm.
Through the years, you've had big men, like Andre.
Right, right.
Andre the giant, they call him, because he was
Right.
young. Look at Shaq, whatever is that.
Shaquille, yeah, O'Neal.
I mean, we had big,
Yeah, we do have
tall men. We
Mhm.
call them Anakin giants.
Yeah.
None of them had 9 feet tall, 9 Dickerson, them giants.
Well,
But,
it was 13, 14.
they don't have the bones from the line.
And his family was that big too.
Yes.
They were talking about the bed.
They probably had to be in that.
Like with keeping
area
dogs.
somewhere.
Yeah.
In bed.
Yeah. And then and two, and then the other side of the story is a lot of times when we look at biblical literature, we interpret it as literally, and sometimes we forget that they're using metaphors just like we do. Because when we say someone is a shrimp today, we don't really mean they're the size of a shrimp. We just mean they're small. And, so,
Bigger, a lot bigger.
so, yeah. So, yeah. Down and mated, yeah. And so there's, that's a whole thing in itself as to do you believe they're fallen angels or not? These are descendants of. So. Okay, so getting back to what we were saying, that this was evil speech. This was Lashon Hara against the land. And this was against the land that Yah chose to give them as a gift.
I look at that part there, that y'all are putting them through a major test.
He's putting them through a test, yeah. Well, and two, Yah's telling him to go out and, I'm giving you something. Go see the good in it. Don't look and say, oh, well, I'm giving this. Wait a minute, there's a little thread that's out, and this is, what. When somebody gives you a gift, you don't sit there and pick through it and say, oh, well, you know what? There's a little thread here. You missed this part. You thank them and you look for the good. Yes, some people will do that. Okay.
When y'all brought them out of Egypt,
Mhm.
they started complaining right off the bat.
They started complaining, yeah. So think about today. How many people are committing the same act today? They're speaking against the land of Israel.
Yep.
And they're wanting to divide the land. If we go to the book of Joel.
Yeah, what in the world? Evidently, this verse you go read right here, I want to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Find it, is that when God says something, how do they override that? Is these pastors, these priests, these people just say we got the ability to override what God said in His Word? Because how they overlook Joel right here? What Lisa's doing? What Lisa's going to say right here?
And in Joel chapter 3, it depends on which version you're reading. If you're in the complete Jewish Bible or some Hebraic numbered Bible, it will be chapter 4. 3, or it might be chapter 4, depending on which Bible you have. So Joel chapter 3, verse 1, or chapter 4, verse 1. Okay. It says, for then at that time, when I restore the fortunes of Yehuda and Jerusalem.
And it's talking about the end times here.
Yep. I will gather all nations and bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat. That's in the front of the eastern gate. Okay. Because Jehoshaphat means Yah judges. Okay. I will enter into judgment there for my people, my heritage Israel, whom they scattered among the nations.
Yeah.
Then they divided my land.
Yeah, there it is. They divided my land.
So Yah says he's going to judge those who divided his land.
And I thought it was awesome, took out their mind, it says, on account of my people.
My heritage Israel. Yeah.
And I'm going, wow.
Yeah.
So right now, the land hasn't been divided, right?
Well, it's divided. Oh, yeah. 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 You think, does Israel control
About 1/10
yeah,
of the land
that was
God
promised to
gave
Abraham? Yeah. But then you also think about the land that they are in right now. Do they control Gaza? Do they control the West Bank, or what's called the West Bank, Judea and Samaria? Do they? Yeah. Yeah. So they don't. Yeah. So as the temple, think about the Temple Mount. It's still divided.
Yeah, but what I'm about to say, they destroy all the
Mhm.
high places, destroy those things,
Yeah.
and get them out of the way. 67.
Yeah.
And we'll just let them have a place of worship.
Yeah.
God said destroy
Yeah.
those idols, and they didn't do it. And so they've had to deal with them for the last, how many years? 50-something years?
Well,
I
yes.
think that right there, Eddie, was the worst sin that Israel could commit, not to tear down that high place right there.
And that
Because
they're
that
still.
was an abomination.
And
God's
tell me
face
this,
right there to
why
understand because that was the
any
place.
believer, tell me why any believer would go up there, and for you to go in the Dome of the Rock with a mosque, you've got to take your shoes off.
Yeah, I never went in
And,
there.
and
I
why
understand
would
it was-
a great Christian or believer to wanna take their shoes off? Because when you take your shoes off, God always says, this is a holy place. Well,
Yeah,
that's not a holy place, that's a high place to say. So,
and they're riding inside the dome too. I mean.
Yeah,
I don't think we need one.
But it does. Yeah, but it does say, yeah, but it does say that he doesn't have a son. So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's there. Okay, Numbers chapter 13. I'm going to go back a minute. Oh, she can hear. Okay, Numbers chapter 13 and verse 3. I'm going to go back and look at the names here. And it says, Moshe dispatched them from the Paran desert as Yah had ordered. All of them were leading men among the people of Israel. Here are their names: from the tribe of Reuben, Shammua, the son of Zakur; from the tribe of Shimon, Shaphat, the son of Hori; from the tribe of Yehuda, Caleb, the son of Uneth; from the tribe of Issachar, Yigal, the son of Yosef; from the tribe of Ephraim, Hoshea, the son of Nun; from the tribe of Benjamin, Palti, the son of Raphu; from the tribe of Zebulun, Gadiel, the son of Sodi; and from the tribe of Yosef, that is from the tribe of Manasseh, Gadi, the son of Susi; from the tribe of Dan, Amliel, the son of Gamali; and from the tribe of Asher, Satur, the son of Michael; and from the tribe of Naphtali, Nachbi, the son of Boshi; and that is from the tribe of Gad, Guiel, the son of Maki. These are the names of the men that Moshe sent out to spy the land. And Moshe gave Hoshea, the son of Nun, the name Yahashua. And Moshe sent them to spy the land of Canaan, instructing them going up from the Negev into the hills. So when you look at those names, there are 37 names listed here in the genealogy, which is interesting because these, there are 37 names listed, and this is the 37th parsha of the year, or portion of the year.
Can I ask you a question before you go on?
Mhm.
When they say to pick these tribes, like Judah,
Mhm.
okay, the son of.
Yeah.
Did he go in order of the oldest son?
No, it just says that he chose leaders. He just says leaders. It doesn't say. Yeah, it doesn't say who. It just said the leaders of those tribes. So that would probably been not necessarily the oldest, but whoever was, character.
Yeah. And the way they lived and did things.
So when we look at this 37, 37 is also the value of the word haleb, which is the heart. So again, they're going up to search or spy out the heart of him, and this is the land. And we know that if we look at Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 12, if you want to write that verse down, you don't have to turn there, but it says, it is a land that Yah, your Elohim, cares for. The eyes of Yah, your Elohim, are always upon it from the beginning of the year to the end of the year.
Well, why in the world, every pastor out there read that, and explain that, why God has forgotten Israel.
Yeah.
And that we're the church, we're the important.
Because it's replaced. It's replacement theology. So that is all of the land, the people, everything's been replaced.
So it's not when you said that like that, and they didn't understood the word,
Mm.
and had a heart there, and they stood up, because wait a minute, I want to ask you a question about what
Yeah.
you just said.
But they're most of the time, they're not going to preach out. They're not going to preach out there. They're not. So it's, we just have to pray. Yeah. Okay. Second is done away with. Yeah. Yeah. It's for the Jewish people and stuff. That's why they're looking at, that's for the Jew and this is not for us. And so that's where, you're having to look at how do we have to combat.
Anything after Jesus is, they look at everything perspective of the Bible when it's for the belief is Matthew to Revelation.
Right.
Now, they look at, they'll have some teachings about the Old Testament. They'll use it for tithes and offerings and all this other stuff. But when it comes to, really living a life,
Yeah.
no.
So, and then that's the thing is, one of the things we have to be careful of is, that is Yah's land. He says his eyes are upon it from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. Even in 2 Chronicles chapter 7 and verse 16, he also says, talking about when the temple was built, he says, for now I have chosen and consecrated this house so that my name will be there forever. And he's talking about where was this house built? It was built on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And he says, my eyes and my heart will always be there.
Will always be there.
So, not the temple, but the Temple Mount is still there.
Well,
it's still
the land.
The land, the land, his eyes, Mount Moriah is still there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so, that's true. And so this evil report is that's brought, according to Jewish tradition, that this happens on the 9th of Av. And if we go to chapter 14 and verse 1, it starts, look at how the people react. In chapter 14, verse 1, it says, at this, all the people of Israel cried out in dismay and wept all night long. And so all of Israel cried. Now, tradition says that because this is tradition, that because all of Israel ended up weeping and crying about this, that Yah says, okay, like parents sometimes say, well, if you want to cry about it, I'm going to give you something to cry about.
Yeah.
That's what Yah did. I don't know. I don't necessarily think that Yah did that, but that tradition says that Yah says that this is going to be a night of crying throughout your history. Yeah. And so the 9th of Av holds many ominous events because not only was this when the first temple was destroyed, the second temple was destroyed. In 1290, we see the Jews being expelled from England on the 9th of Av. In 1492, we see Jews being expelled from Spain on the 9th of Av. World War I started on the 9th of Av. So when you start looking at all those things, there were pretty bad. Another thing is when we look at going back to chapter 13 and looking at these spies here, in verse 8, we see that of Ephraim, we have Hoshea, the son of Nun. And in verse 11, we see we've got of the tribe of Joseph, of the tribe of Manasseh, Gadi ben Susi, the son of Susi. So here we've got basically the tribe of Joseph listed twice,
Yeah.
because we've got Ephraim is Joseph and Manasseh is Joseph. So they're listed twice. Why?
Because- Go ahead, Eric.
Because because remember the Levites start sent out. So we still get the number 12.
And to, Jacob, when Joseph,
Mhm.
he said, these are my sons.
Yeah, he said that those were his sons, but why
And
would you?
Joseph was kind of eliminated.
Yeah, and we still see two, there's 12.
Yeah.
And when you think about the duties and the administration of the tabernacle, it's always linked with the number 12 being linked with government and order and organization of his people. So that's why you see that if you've got the Levites counted, then you only have Joseph listed. You don't have Ephraim and Manasseh split up. But if you don't have Levites counted, then you usually see Ephraim and Manasseh split, so that you always still got that number 12. So that's why you've like, so 12 is that government, that order, that organization. Like even on a clock, you'll see that 12, or a calendar. So
Like in the
with the 12 disciples, yeah, they replaced that so they could have the 12. Mhm. Yeah,
It's not, they Levi, their possession was Jehovah.
yep, yep.
So they didn't get no possession.
In the land itself. Yeah, the Levites didn't get a possession in the land, even though they were appointed cities to have it. So,
Leo.
yeah. But that was also for a purpose to, within each tribe, to teach each one of those that were within that tribe. So now we know in, Mhm.
And all that.
So in chapter 13, verse 16, we see that we know Hoshea is renamed Yahashua, and that it's Hoshea or Yahashua and Caleb that bring back the 12, out of the 12, that bring back the positive report. Okay, and so we see his name being changed. Well, in English, it looks like his name's changed totally.
Yeah.
But Hoshea is spelled Hey Bob Shin Ayin. Hey Bob Shin Ayin. And Yahashua is spelled Yud Hey Bob Shin Ayin. So the only difference to his name, it really wasn't changed. It was just added a letter at the beginning. The Yod is added at the very beginning of his name. And by adding the Yod to the very first of his name, we now got part of Yah's name in there, Yahashua. And by adding it to the beginning, we've got that Yah, short, which is the shortened name in it. And it's like Yah is putting his spirit in Yahashua there by putting his name on it. Now,
in Hebrew, it was O-S. I can't spell shit.
Oh, no, H is in there, Hoshea.
Just O.
Well, that might have been the way yours translated, because Hoshea is with the A.
Okay.
Now, if you go over to chapter 14 and verse 24, 14:24, we see that it says, but my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit with him, he has fully followed me, him I will bring into the land, and he which he entered, and I will belong, and it will belong to his descendants. So look at what it's saying here. Okay, Hoshea has his name, he's changed, or a yud added to it, so his name becomes Yahashua, which is like now putting Yah's spirit in him. And we've got Caleb already says he has a different spirit in him. Yah already said he had a different spirit in him. And, and it says that I will give him into the land he entered, which is interesting because, well, I'll get there in a minute. I'm not going to go ahead. Okay.
Well, no, I need to ask about that. When I was reading, it said that he would bring him into the land where he went, where his descendants showed, and that means that's where Caleb had walked.
Yeah, Caleb went into Hebron.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you look at that verse where it talks about they go into the Hebron and they saw the Anakim there, it actually does not say they went into there. It says he went in there. That really they stayed on the mountain, and Caleb went into Hebron by himself, and he saw the Anakim. So, and that was the land that he was given. So then you come back to the question, how did the rest of them know that there were Anakim there?
Yeah, because they were way back.
Unless they saw him, if they saw him from the mountaintop, you know, they could have looked and saw it from the mountaintop. But if you're looking down on someone from the mountaintop, are you going to be able to tell that they're a giant? No. Yeah. Okay. So you're probably not going to be able to tell, but really the only source that they have is that from Caleb that they were Anakim. So, well, too, and Caleb's name means dog. Okay. Dog. Caleb. Yeah, dog. Caleb is a dog.
Did they have like carrier pigeon there?
No, they did not have a carrier.
They did it with war. They did it war.
Okay. Eddie's. Yeah. Maybe maybe Caleb sent a carrier pigeon back with the message to the rest of saying, okay. Oh, yeah, it was okay. Okay. So it doesn't say about they went out with pigeons. Okay. Yeah, dog. D-O-G, dog. Yeah. Do you know what dog is in Hebrew? If you say dog in Hebrew, it means fish.
Oh, well, that's weird. That's kind of
Caleb
crazy. I
means
never
dog.
heard that before.
Yeah. The word dog, if you say dog in Hebrew, like if you go, like we would go to fish, you're saying fish. But if you say, like, I have a dog, you would say Caleb. I need, I have, Caleb. Yes, Caleb. So this is a dog.
Learn something new. Wow.
So that's just like, yeah. That some of the words, they sound like English words, but they mean something different. Okay. For example, ma does not mean your mother. It means what? Me means who. Who means he. He means she.
Wow.
So
Okay.
they sound like English words, but they mean something different in Hebrew. So that's like if you say, one shirt I would never transliterate into Hebrew, and where in Israel is Arizona. Because Arizona, if you write it out, Arizona means Ari is a whore.
Oh, wow. I didn't know. Wow.
But if you had it transliterated and you're wearing it there, you're saying that Ari is a whore. That's exactly what you're saying. So, okay. So sidetrack. Caleb means dog. But when you look at that, you think about, he's called a dog. Well, one, he's called a dog. He's got the spirit. He's got a different spirit in him. But Caleb's name can also be broken up into two Hebrew words. It can be Kal, Leth. The first two letters, the Kaf, Lamed, which is Kal, which means all. And the second two letters, Lamed, Beit, or Veit, which is Lev, is heart. So all heart. Well, you think about a dog. A dog is all heart. They're loyal. There's a reason they're called man's best friend. Okay.
So that's what it means. Caleb was more loyal to Jehovah than the rest of them.
But Caleb was very loyal. Yeah. Now, if we go to a couple of different places, well, even back in Numbers 13, where it talks about that he chose Caleb, okay, up in verse 6, of the tribe of Yehuda, Caleb, the son of Yoneth. Okay, we also see in chapter 32 and verse 12 that Caleb is called the son of Yoneth. And if we look at chapter 32, verse 12, it gives us a little bit more about Keneth. It says, Keneth the Kenazi, Okay. The Kenizi and the Kenizi, well, who were they? They weren't the Canaanites. No, that's the Canaan. Okay. The Kenizi here are actually, I'm going to go one other place. Joshua chapter 14. In Joshua 14, it also says that in verse 6, the descendants of Yehuda approached Jehoshua in Gilgal, and Caleb the son of Uneph, the Kenizi, said to him, you know what Yah told Moshe, the man of God, about me and you in the Kadesh Barnea. Okay, so here again, we got another passage that says that Caleb is the son of Uneph, the Kenizi or the Canaanite. Okay, so who are the Canaanites? Well, if we go back to Genesis, in Genesis chapter 15 in verse 18, this is when Yah is promising and making the covenant with Abraham, and he's giving this land, and he's saying in verse 18, I have given this land to your descendants from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river to the Euphrates, the territory of the Canaanite, the Kenizi, the Kadomi, so we actually have the Kenizi were in the land prior to them coming there. Okay. And then we see that, okay, in verse, in verse.
So Caleb, he was in the mixed multitude then.
Well, he wasn't a mixed multitude. He was actually a convert. Because when we go through, we see that when Yah made it, in verse Exodus 23 and 31, I will set the boundaries from the Sea of Suf to the Sea of the Plishtim, and from the desert of the Euphrates River, for I will hand the inhabitants of the land over to you, and I will drive them out before you. So when Yah made a covenant with Abraham, he gave them that land that was inhabited by those nations. And when they came into the land, what were they supposed to do? Drive them out. Did they do that?
No.
No. Okay. And the children of Israel did not. Eventually, there were some of those that decided to join in with Israel. And as a result, they were grafted in. They converted to a tribe, whichever one they were dwelling around. Now, the Kenizis were actually named after Kenaz. Well, Kenaz, if we go back to Genesis chapter 36 and verse 11, Genesis 36 and 11, well, I'm going to go back to verse 10. The names of Esau's sons were Eliphaz, the son of Admah, the wife of Esau, and Ruel, the son of Basmat, the wife of Esau. And the sons of Eliphaz were Teman, Omar, Zapho, Gatam, and Kenaz. So could it be that the Kenaz of the line of Judah is actually referring to the son of Esau? And we see in chapter 36, Genesis 36 and verse 15, it says that the chieftains of the son of Esau were the sons of Eliphaz, the firstborn of Esau, and the chieftains were Teman, Omar, Zapho, and Kenaz again. And so a Kenizi is a descendant of Esau, which is not from one of the tribes of Israel, but from the tribes of Esau. And for Caleb to be considered Yehuda, he had to have been grafted in or like a convert to Yehuda from among the nations. Yes. And so now when it says we see, Yah completely says that he has a different spirit. But he says he has a different spirit. Well, why? Because he was from the sons of Esau, and he has a different spirit now. He has the spirit of linking with Yehuda, and he is, even though he is not of the bloodline of Yehuda, he is grafted in, and he is as a natural born Yehuda, and he is considered of the tribe of Yehuda with 100% rights. Yah has always provided a way for the non-Israelite to become a part of Israel. That's why, when we look at Ephesians chapter 2, in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 11, when Paul says, therefore remember your former state. You were Gentiles by birth, called the uncircumcised by those who merely because of an operation of their flesh are called circumcised. And at that time you had no Messiah. You were estranged from the national life of Israel. So you were separate from Israel, but now you're a part of them. Doesn't mean that you replaced them, but you're a part of them. You were foreigners to the covenants embodying God's promise. You were in this world without a hope and without Elohim. But now you who were once afar off have been brought near through the shedding of Mashiach's blood.
That's right.
Yeah.
We were from,
Yep.
and we made the change.
Over. And so we have a different spirit. Yeah. Like Caleb, we're to have that different spirit within. Yeah, and when it is just like he's considered 100% Yehuda. And so when you look at this, it says the same, in Exodus chapter 12, verse 49, he tells them that the same teaching is to apply to the citizen as well as to the foreigner who's living among you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even I'll read this verse in Isaiah 56 and verse 6. It says, and the foreigners who join themselves to Yah to serve him, to love the name of Yah, and to be his workers, all who keep my Shabbat and do not profane it and hold fast to my covenant, I will bring them to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and sacrifices will be accepted on my altar, for my house will be called a house of prayer for all people. So Caleb was grafted in with Yehuda, and the same Torah would apply to him just as it does the native born, just as it does for us today. And, we may not can trace our lineage back to Yaakov or Israel, but that doesn't matter, because if we hold to Torah and the covenant and keep Shabbat, then Yah keeps us or accepts us just as he does a native born. Yeah, he grafted to Judah. Yeah, and so whichever tribe you stayed around or that was the one you grafted into. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Made it. I always thought his heart went over.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, for God, can you imagine for God to say something like that about Caleb?
Yeah, that he had a different heart, and that's what.
Never hear much about him.
No. Yeah, you don't really know a lot about him, and that's when you start going back and through and look. And even in Ezekiel chapter 47, Ezekiel told of dividing the land even to those that were not native born. In Ezekiel 47 and verse 22, Yah tells Ezekiel, he says, here, you are to divide it by lot as an inheritance, both to you and the foreigners that were living there among you, who give birth to children living among you. For you are to have, they are to be no different from the native born among the people of Israel. They are to have an inheritance among you, or inheritance with you among the tribes of Israel. So they were to be as the native born, and they were going to be given land too. Now, looking at these men, I'm not going to go through all their names, but these men, there were leaders in Israel, and Yah was basically testing them and saying, he was, in turn was testing the children of Israel, because the leaders are going out and the people are going to do as the leader of their, tribes. That's just like, in congregations, however the pastor goes, that's usually how the church will go. Okay. They went, came back with that good report. Yep. People chose to go that way. Yep. In Numbers 13 and verse 17, notice what it says here. And Moshe sent them to spy out the land of Canaan and said to them, go up here into the south and go up to the mountains and see what the land is like, and the people who dwell in it, whether strong or weak, whether few or many, whether the land they dwell in is good or evil, whether the cities they inhabit are in camps or strongholds, and whether the land is rich or poor, and whether there are forests or not. And it shall be strong, and you will bring some of the fruit of the land. Now is the time of the season for the first fruits of the grapes. And so as they're going through, they're looking at different aspects of the land. They're looking to see, the people what are the people like who live there? Are they strong? Are they weak? Are there a lot of them? Is the land, is it good or is it evil? Are the cities inhabited? Are they a stronghold? Are they walled? Because that's going to make a difference of how you battle it, because if it has a wall or not, it's going to be harder to attack. Is the
people that were lying in land, the others conquered, before they could come back.
Yeah.
All of them got good land, basically, because none of it was desert or thorny.
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, they all ended up getting a portion that was good. Yeah. So,
A lot of it was.
Yeah.
Thorny,
Yeah, but still, it was, yeah.
It was all livable.
Mhm.
That was what, and God planned that for them.
Mhm.
That's.
In verse 18, Moshe tells them to see what the land is like. And that word see is ra'ah. So it doesn't only mean to see with your eyes, but it means to perceive. It's and 13, still in 13. So he's telling him, not only you see with your eyes, but you've got to see with your senses. Because remember, their mission was to go out and tour the land. It was to see the vision that Yah has for them in the promised land. And they were there to gather data. This is, about how so Yah has given them an opportunity to see with their spiritual eyes, this prophetic vision. And we know the verse in Proverbs 29:18, it says, without a prophetic vision, that people throw off all restraint, and so
That just occurred to me, first trip, maybe second trip, we was out there.
mhm.
I can say for myself and you and Eddie and Jack too, we saw the land for what God said it was gonna be for us,
Yeah.
We didn't, but a lot of people just saw.
So it,
the
yeah,
big
desert,
desert.
yeah.
They could care, they didn't want to go back, they could care less.
Well,
about the
I mean,
land.
that's just like Mark Twain when he went in the 1800s. He went out there and he saw the land, and he said it was, a desert. He said it was one of the most uninhabitable places in the world. Who would ever want to live there? But then again, you have someone in that same time period, right around there, like Lawrence of Olivier, and that they were like, the desert's beautiful and there is so much there. And I mean, just like if you go to Engedi and you put a little water in that ground, what's going to happen? Something's going to grow.
Yeah.
It's
It used to be one of the most beautiful places on earth.
right.
At one time, because it was well watered.
It was well watered, yeah.
Like you said, in Gady, put that water, and everywhere that water flows, it's green and beautiful.
Yeah, and that's just like,
We
yeah.
We saw it through spiritual eyes, and we
Yeah.
just loved the land. We just expected
But
everything.
that's the difference, Joyce.
Yeah, who has the spiritual eyes to see it?
And you got that in you that God put in you, not man. Then you see things different.
Yeah.
You see it for what it is.
Yeah, I mean, that's just like right
It's the
now.
land that
This is
God-
this is just current story. Diane Neal, I follow her on Instagram. She used to be the actress that played as the lawyer. She was the redheaded lawyer on Law and Order. She is a new immigrant. I made that before in Ola Hadash, and she is like, bombs are going off everywhere now, and she's posting, and she's like, friends are asking her, "Are you okay? You're real worried," and she's like, I'm the happiest I've ever been. Yeah, I'm not getting a lot of sleep because I'm getting up 2 or 3 times a night to go down to the Mamad. And, you don't really, people don't think, they think bomb shelter and they think your own private bomb shelter. But you go down to the Mamad and it is the Mamad for the whole building. And so you might have 40 other families with their dogs and their crying kids and their pets. And everything in that one room together. And she's like, you don't really a lot of times get a lot of sleep. And the rock on the missiles and things are happening at 2 or 3 o'clock. But she's like, she's seeing the land with those eyes, those spiritual eyes. So
I share my home with 2 other families
Mhm.
because right now we're being bombarded from around. I have a shelf underneath my house.
Yeah.
They got to pick one. It's
Yeah.
so far
Away.
away. So
Yeah.
she said, we're proud, but we're fine. We're
Yeah.
happy.
Yeah.
And that's the way you have to look at things.
Yeah. You got to look at it with those different eyes. And even though, I know now it's a big thing because they can't publicly gather, there can only gather with so many. And I think it's less than 10. So they can't really have a synagogue service and stuff right now because you can't have that many people there. So, okay, let's get back to, yeah. So, again, they were committing Lashon Hara by bringing back evil against the land. But notice how the pattern of this. Yah is using these antonyms here. Look and see if they're weak or strong. Those are opposite. Few or many. Those are opposite. Good or bad. That's opposite. Is the land open or fortified? Those are opposite. Rich or poor is opposite. Wooded or not? Is that opposite?
Would it or not?
Yes.
He didn't describe the not.
He didn't say wooded or barren. He says wooded or not.
Yeah.
So when you look at the last set here, it is not really an anonym because not is not the opposite of wooded. You could have said wooded or barren or forested or desert, but he used wooded or not. And, however, Moshe, used specific words here, and we know the Torah is very specific about words. So in this pattern, he uses all these opposites until you get to this one part. And it's drawing attention to wooded is what stands alone, because in Hebrew, it is the word etz or tree. So why would Moshe be concerned about whether there were trees in the land or not? Because, we think about, well, wait a minute, trees. Yeah, they're going to have trees. They know there are going to be trees, but what is the importance here? Remember Psalms 1 says, blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful, but his delight is in the law of Yah, and in his law does he meditate day and night, and he shall be like a tree. Planted by rivers of water that brings forth fruit in a season. So when we talk about trees, it's also talking about people, men. Yes. And so what was he referring to when he's talking about were there wood or not? Were there righteous men? Were there planted by, because they were, are there any righteous men there that are not? In Isaiah 61:3, it says, talking about people, that they might be called trees of righteousness, the planting of Yah. So Moshe may have remembered that, Abraham had interceded for Sodom and Gomorrah, and that Yah was willing to spare those cities based on the fact that if there were righteous people in it, and so Moshe is asking the spies to go in and look and see, are there any trees there? Meaning it's a metaphor for, are there any righteous men there? Because if they are, we might be spared in those cities that can merit protection, just like some of the others, like you were mentioning with Rahab. Okay, and Numbers 13 and 20, it says, and the land, and what the land is, whether it be fertile or barren, whether there be wood or not therein, and be of good courage and bring the fruit of the land. Now the time of the first grapes is here. So, for us to think about that this was a test, a valuable lesson for us to learn, because, as you're going there, he tells them, be of good courage. It is, not, it's Courage is based on belief, not on what you see. Because just as obedience is based on belief, because if we go by what we see, we're not going to have courage, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you look just with your physical eyes, when you see something, I mean, it's gonna scare you to death.
Yeah.
But when you let go of that, look in the spiritual, say, God said, do it. Like he told, Caleb and them, go take the land, I'll take care of it.
Yeah.
And they had to, cause they saw the giants, they saw all I mean, hey, think about the guy, during the 67 war that ran, the soldier that ran to the machine gun nest and took it out and saved a bunch of more and lost his life. He was looking in the spiritual sense of, giving his life for his people.
And to think, does Yah ever say, I mean, I don't know, I have to go back and look. Does he ever say, see, O Israel?
No.
It's always hear, O Israel. Even in Revelation, it says, let those who have ears hear, not let those who have eyes see. Because our eyes can fool us and our heart. And a lot of people say, well, I'll just let my heart lead me. Well, the word says our heart's wicked.
Yep.
Yeah. So we, don't let your heart lead you. You need to let Yah lead you.
You follow faith.
Yeah.
And cry out a Father. That's the only way that to be led.
Yeah.
That's the only way.
So, like I said, courage is based on belief, and so is obedience is based on belief. That's why it's important that when times of testing comes, that we need to encourage each other, because it's not based on what we see. It's got to be based on what we hear from Yah. So.
Certain things.
Mhm.
You come back every way.
Yeah, and two, and there's all kind of different kinds of tests and trials. And two, one of the things we think about, we're not promised just because we're a believer that things are going to be prosperous or beautiful, or easy. We're not promised that. I mean, it says, that even I was reading in Job and Proverbs this week too, and it was talking about even the wicked are going to have extended life. The wicked are going to, and then you have kids, you have kids who are little, like, Max I had, who died at 10 years old of cancer. Why is that? He didn't do anything evil or wicked, but yet then you have someone that's evil and wicked living to be 90. And it is, it rains on the just and the unjust, but the point is that trials will come to all of us, and you can't just say because someone is living a long life that they're righteous, just like you can't say someone that is wicked.
But prayer can change.
Prayer can change, yeah. Yes.
See, Yah knows its last cycle.
Yeah.
The one who's going to live, not be.
Yeah. And two, and this is one of the things I've looked at, is that sometimes I think that Yah allows, because, we use this word a lot, especially at a funeral. Talk about Ecclesiastes. There's a time to live, a time to die. The Lord gives and the Lord takes. But when someone dies, do people say that the Lord's taken them? Because they don't. But that's really what he's doing. And sometimes Yah is taking someone to save them for something that's going to happen later on. You know what I'm saying? That could be worse than that. Yeah. Yeah. And so, sometimes you think about it, that sometimes it is that he is saving them from something else that we don't see right now.
And get involved in so much that if they are believers, they stress and they just turn and they don't go to God with everything. They go, oh,
Well, I mean, you think about it. Somebody gets sick. What's their first thing to do? Pick up the phone. We're going to call the doctor. When it should be the first thing you do is go pray. It's not that, that's their first thought.
This is the thing of all of this. God is
Omnipotent, yeah.
He knows all. He is all, the past, present, future. There is nothing that God can't do,
Mhm,
that He can't change,
mhm.
that He can't heal. That, I mean, I can sit and say, well, and I'm not trying to be, because when we talk about certain things, God's saving you for something, well, God can change it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He can, that, I mean.
We
I-
don't know his mind and
Yeah,
his
I
ways
kinda
are
look
high.
I kind of look at that like, because if we say God's trying to save us from something worse later on, then they're saying, well, can't God stop that?
Yeah.
Can't God heal that?
Mhm.
Can't God do something about that?
Mhm.
What's the answer to that?
Well,
The answer is absolutely.
yeah, he can.
He can.
I'm not saying every instance
I
of that.
know.
I'm just saying that
But I-
sometimes it may be that,
But I hear people say, put limits on God.
no, yeah.
And there's no limit
Mm-mm.
on God, because the woman had the issue of blood of 12 years.
Yeah.
God didn't say it was my will that she should be healed. The word said her faith
Healed her, yeah.
made her.
Yeah.
It didn't say
Yeah.
by his
But
will.
then you come up to the question about, then is it all about your faith? Because then people who aren't healed, are you saying that they don't
Well,
have enough faith?
what is faith? What is faith? Faith is not good enough. Now, everything is not going, and I get you can't explain God.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. And that's what I'm saying, that sometimes that will be the question people say, then that's what people have said, that, we've had people say that, well, you're not getting healed because you don't have enough faith.
We have a mindset. Though a lot of people, what they say when somebody gets sick, they say, well, it's the will of God.
Mhm.
Well, is it?
Yeah. Now, and then,
Is it really? If we're saying that we put, maybe because we went ahead and put the limits on y'all, that faith right there was maybe it stopped something. And I don't know, I think that's what it comes down to. Now, sure, everybody that has everything, a lot of things, Adam sinned.
mhm,
And because Adam sinned, we get older, we things go around the body, because the body
it's supposed to,
decays
yeah.
as we get older. But I do think that our faith a lot of times is what we talked about just then,
Mhm.
is we're looking at things with our eyes
Right.
instead of giving God every chance to be who he is. And who was the guy in the Bible that's asked God for 10 more years in the game?
Yeah. And then some, I think too, it's, no. And I think too, a lot of it is about when we think, okay, we got to tell him all of this stuff. We got to tell him, oh, such and such, this is happening, or I've got this, or I got that. He knows that. You don't have to tell him all that. Start thanking him for the healing of it. And it's about our words. But then also in John 11:4, it says that this sickness is, what did we say? Well, on hearing it says, when Jesus said this, that this sickness not unto death, that for this is from the no, it is for God's glory, so that Yah will get. So sometimes people look at the things that you're going through something. It is for His glory that you're going through it. It is not necessarily because you sinned or whatever. But it, yeah.
A better believer,
right?
helps you for the next time. But there's a scripture that says plainly this, and this is basic English. I don't have to look at interpretation for this. It says, above all others,
Yeah.
I would want you to be in health and to prosper.
Yeah.
Above all others.
Mm-hmm.
That came out of Yah's mouth. So that's power. That means something.
Yeah.
And I know every sickness is not going. I've been healed immediately sometimes, and sometimes it's just went through my body.
Yeah.
And I can't explain everything, But the way I try to do things is not explain it. It's just go all out on faith and say, y'all, you said you're not man that you can lie.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
this is you. Here it is.
Well, you can look at it this way too. Like Job, he was a righteous man,
Yeah,
but Satan went beyond
yeah,
and told him,
Well,
so,
he went through.
head first you at your face.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that
And I think that's the same thing that we go through.
and that wasn't something because
Of his sin, yeah.
of sin.
Mhm.
That was because God allowed Satan to do that. Now, maybe God allowed Satan to do a lot of these things to see how much faith we're gonna have.
Yeah.
To see, are we gonna put up with it? Or if God says, this is what I'm giving you for now.
Right. And
And I choose to go what God says he said in the Torah, the Tanakh, and the New Testament. Your faith moves God.
yeah, and two, think about
Okay.
this, it all goes back to Lashon Hara and speaking evil. How much of it that we're talking about the bad, we're talking about the problem, we're talking about
Yeah.
such that when we shouldn't be talking about that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Is that, and a friend, okay, I'll just say, like a friend, whose mother had passed away, was said, her mom got to the point where she's like, I don't want to say how bad I feel. When every time somebody asks me how bad I feel, I don't want to say that. So turned it around and said, oh, I'm blessed. I feel blessed and loved today. Instead of saying, oh, my head's killing me or whatever, it's just, I feel blessed and loved today. Always trying to look for the good in that day instead of the negative. Yeah.
What's gonna be, what's gonna be.
Right. So,
To listen to the Holy Spirit.
Mhm.
Blessing. It is me, bad.
Mhm.
I never rest good anyway, and I never back to one. And all at once I said, I've got to apologize. I thought the Lord like I did.
Mhm.
I said, Holy Spirit, you speak to me. I said, Lord, I've sinned again. I said, I talked about my neighbor
Mhm.
behind his back
Mhm.
about how bad he is.
Mhm.
And I said, I should have just said, well, I'm gonna pray for him instead of saying anything bad, because, and I said, forgive me. I mean, you
Right.
have to be obedient and you have to really listen to the Holy Spirit, because I know the other night, I always pray for you and Eddie, your protection and all that stuff, and the Lord spoke to me about mine. I said, Lord, meet his need, whatever it is. I don't know what he's going through, but provided meet his need.
Right.
See what about him, whatever. And I said, I just lift him up to you because it's in your hands.
And to speak those positive words.
Yeah.
Okay, let's keep going so we can get there. Numbers 13:23, it says, they came to the valley of Eshcol, and there they cut off a branch bearing one cluster of grapes, which they carried on a pole between the two of them, and they took pomegranates and figs, and that place was called the valley of Eshcol, or cluster, because of the cluster which the people of Israel cut down. 40 days later, they returned from spying the land. So when they were in the valley of Eshcol, they picked the fruit of the land, like I said, Eshcol means a cluster. And this cluster of grapes was so heavy that they had to carry, two men had to carry it on a pole between the two of them. And that picture of two men carrying a cluster of grapes is actually the picture that is used for the ministry of tourism today in Israel. On their vehicles, you will see two men carrying a cluster of grapes. So this fruit is a prophetic picture, because the land of Israel is synonymous with Torah and life of living the Torah. Yeah. And so the two men are a picture of the two witnesses that are bearing the fruit here. And they're united as one, as they're carrying the testimony of, Messiah. And, we can see this, that if we're following his commands and we're seeing his vision, then we are to bear an abundant fruit. And that this single cluster of grapes represents the whole house of Israel. But in unity, we can bear the first fruits. And this made me think of in the book of John, in John 15:5-8, where he says, I am the vine and you are the branches. And if a man remains in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not remain in me, he is like a branch that is thrown away and withers. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be given to you. This is to my Father's glory that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. And they brought back also, the pomegranates and the figs. And the pomegranates are taught, traditionally to have 613 seeds, which represent the 613 commands. The figs are thought to represent those who were outside of the Torah, now returning to Yah's teachings and instructions. And so the whole picture together here represents that those who have the Messiah on their heart and they walk in his Torah, in his lifestyle here, they're going to bear much fruit, and it's going to come, even from the nations. So, okay, Numbers 13, verse 26. And when Moshe and Aaron and the entire community of the people of Israel at Kadesh and the Paran Desert, when they brought back word to them and to the entire community, he showed them the fruit of the land. And what they told him was this: we've entered the land where you've sent us, and indeed it flows with milk and honey. Here is the fruit, and the people living in the land were fierce, and the cities are fortified, very large. Moreover, we saw the Anakim there, and Amalek lives in the Negev. The Hittite, the Yebusi, the Emori live in the hills, and the Canaan live by the sea alongside the Jordan. And Caleb silenced the people around Moshe and said, we ought to go up immediately, take possession. We can't attack those. But the men with him said, we can't attack those people because they are stronger than we are. And they are spreading a negative report about the land that they had spied for the people of Israel by saying, the land we passed through in order to spy out the land devours its inhabitants. And all the people we saw were giant. And so basically they're exaggerating the truth here. Everybody we saw are giants now here. But part of it, they've got the truth mixed with their fear, and their concern becomes a military thing. They're afraid they can't conquer the land, even though Yah's already told them they could. But Caleb, understood that vision and said, yes, it's, not through our strength that we can do it. It is only through Yah's strength. And, he saw that spiritual vision of Yah and what Yah was capable of doing. And then verse 31, it says, but look at what the men said. But the men who had gone out with them said, we can't attack those people because they are stronger than we are. And there's something interesting here in Hebrew, because at the end of verse 31, it says, because they're stronger than us, or that we are. On a Torah scroll, again, we don't have those nikadot, those vowel pointings. And this word is actually mamenu, okay? And it's spelled mem, nun, vav. Mem, nun, vav. Okay, mamenu. And mamenu without the vowel pointing, okay? Mamenu with that vowel, vav, if we put the dot at the side, it becomes mamenu, you at the end. But if you put the dot at the top, it becomes mameno. There's no dot there. So that word can be read memenu or memeno. And there's a big difference between those meanings, because the way it's written, we can't attack those people because they are stronger than we are. That's memenu. But if I read it memeno, listen to how that verse is going to read. We can't attack those people because they are stronger than he is.
Ooh. Big. Whoa.
So it can be read both ways. And to think about, what they were basically doing. It is the same letters. It's just where you put the dot.
That's what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
But in here,
They don't have a dot because it's a Torah scroll.
Yeah.
So how would they know? What were they really saying? If Yah says it is your land, you can go take it. It is your. Then it's basically them saying they are the creator. They're greater than you, Yah, because of their fear. They were unbelieving and they're faithless. They were seeing with their physical eyes and not their spiritual eyes. They were seeing the struggles and the trials and the giants in the land instead of it is Yah saying that it is yours. Okay.
I mean, it is amazing how the difference in people,
Mhm.
when you say Joshua and Caleb, when they're looking at something, the
Right.
same thing, that this other group's looking at,
Yeah.
and they see two different things.
Right. Well, I mean, you think about this, okay? I mean, I'm honest. I would be one of those people that would probably be very negative. And then, but you think about how many people, when trials and tribulations come, they look at it as, oh, well, I can overcome this. I mean, I honestly don't know. I could be like Trump and, go bankrupt a couple of times, and turn around and say, okay, and look at it as a challenge. Some people face trials and tribulations and they look at it as a challenge of something to overcome and, and are positive through it.
Well,
But the majority are not.
I know people said they, one with this, you
Mhm.
the same thing.
Yeah.
She looked at it. That's my Hebrew right there.
Yeah.
I believe in my faith. And other people didn't look at it.
Yeah. But you think about what do the majority of people? 10 out of the 12 look at it the other way. I mean, you honestly, how many of us honestly, yeah, we're honestly,
Go to hell and go fall off the table. And I think I can't live like that.
Yeah.
I cannot, as a believer, I mean, God doesn't do everything I ask, but he said, and this is strange, this is real strange in the word. He says, remind me.
yeah.
Well, God don't have all.
Yeah, he doesn't, he doesn't need reminded, but
But he said.
he's doing it for
remind me.
us. Yeah.
So I remind him all the time.
Mhm.
I said, God, I know you don't have a bad memory, but I'm reminding you said this.
Yeah.
So what about
You said that for our benefit.
It's for our benefit. Yeah. And to think about this is there was only a remnant. There were only 2 out of the 12 that really looked at it with those eyes. I mean, and that's hard to do. Yeah, that's hard to do.
And you, they, because there was gonna be a whole remnant side with all that.
Yeah.
other-
Yeah.
Him against who,
Yeah.
How many times did we get on buses in Jerusalem from 2000 to
Mhm.
2005 when they were blowing up buses? And this is not a pat on our back, but how many times, there's times I didn't want to get on there.
Mhm.
My faith wasn't strong, but I said, Father, you gave me Psalms 91.
Yeah.
I said, so I'm getting on the bus. And I said, now, if there's a time I need to get off of it, tell me to get off.
And that's the thing. There's certain things that I don't know, being there is easier for me to deal with than it is being here. That I had a stronger faith about certain things than here.
Well,
Okay.
pray.
You had to pray, but you also had to have an attitude of, yeah. But it's a different attitude. You had a different attitude about life and things.
Over there. Faith, you're gonna be miserable, fail every day as a believer.
Right.
You are.
Okay.
That's
One other thing, I think I've said this in the past too, but I do want to share this too again because and I don't write block letters. When you write Hebrew script is written differently than block letters. But the land of Israel, basically, here they were saying that Yah is, the enemy here, that these people are stronger than Yah. Okay. And the land is also a picture of the Messiah. Okay. It's a picture of Messiah. And so I wrote block letters here, okay, which I don't really write block. Well, okay, so you've got the Yud, Shin, Vav, Ayin. Okay, Yud, Shin, Vav, Ayin. And I know when I hold it up, it looks backwards. So because my camera's reversed. But Yud, Shin, Vav, Ayin, that's Yeshua. Okay. And what I wanted to show you here is that the land of Israel is Yeshua. How do I get that? Because in Israel today, which a lot of people don't know, but in Israel today, you actually, let me get my camera back up here. Sorry. minimized it and lost it. Okay, is that you have it divided into sections. Okay, Yud. This is an acronym for the land. Yehuda, the area of Judea. If I say it in English, Yehuda.
Yeah.
Shomron, Samaria. Okay, the Vav is the word and. Gaza. So when you look at the land of Israel, it is divided up. No, it's Aza in Hebrew. It's Aza in Hebrew. That's why we put the G there, but in Hebrew it's Aza, the ayin. So you actually have Yehuda, Shomron, and Aza. So when you think about that is the land, and it is actually in Hebrew, in Israel, they live off the Vav and they just read it as Yesha council instead of Yeshua council. They don't say that this is the Yeshua council, but they leave off the Vav and call it the Yesha council, which is connected. So the land is connected with the Messiah. And so when they are bringing back that bad report, they're bringing back a bad report basically on the Mashiach. They were rejecting him and rejecting the land. So, okay, so let's keep going. Numbers 14 and verse 11. Yah said to Moshe, how much longer is this people going to treat me with contempt? How much longer will they not trust me, especially considering the signs I performed among them? I'm going to strike them with sickness, destroy them, and make from you a nation greater and stronger than they are. So look at what happened. Because of these few people that came back with this bad report, Yah's wanting to get rid of all of them.
Yeah.
Think about how the sin of a few can affect the whole nation. And he wanted to get rid of them all. And he states that he will start a new nation from Moshe, and that this nation is going to be stronger and greater than they are. Now, remember in last week's parsha, Moshe said he was tired of all of them and he wanted to get rid of them. It's like, just kill me. And yet here, his response isn't, okay, great. I'm going to be a great leader and let's go ahead and make my descendants great. No. And so look at what he says in verse 13. However, Moshe replied to Yah, when the Egyptians hear about this, and they will, because it was from among them that you by your strength brought the people up, then they will tell the people living in this land. Is he thinking about the people? That they heard that you, Yah, are with this people and that you have seen them face to face. So is he talking about the people or is he talking about Yah? His concern is Yah. He says it's going to look bad on Yah. It says, because, and it says that you're the cloud that stands over them, that you will go ahead of them in a cloud by day and a column of fire by night. If you kill off this people at a single stroke, then the nations that heard of your reputation will say that the reason Yah slaughtered his people in the desert is that he wasn't able to bring them into the land that he swore to them. So now please let Yah's power be as great as when you said that Yah is slow to anger, rich in grace, forgiving others' offenses and crimes, not exonerating the guilty, but causing the negative effects of the parents' offenses to be experienced by their children, even to the third and fourth generations. Please forgive the offense of this people according to their greatness of your grace, just as you've borne with this people from Egypt until now. So Moshe, his foremost thought was of Yah, which really shows Moshe's humility, that Moshe was concerned about Yah's honor. And he's concerned about how other nations are going to view Yah. Because in ancient times, worship and kingship were interconnected. And if a certain group of people worship whatever God, Moloch or whatever, and they were conquered, then that God was seen as being a weak God, and a failure because it couldn't protect them. So that, that God really was just, thrown to the side. And so when Moses is saying this, Moses's goal first was to protect Yah. And, and then the people as a result of the people. But I think his first thought there is he's talking to Yah. You're going to look bad to the other nations. So he's trying to protect Yah's honor.
Well, what else going on everywhere. I mean, slapping God in the face about homosexual, sex changes, all this stuff. Other nations just took it on. Other countries have took all that on too. After, they follow. Follow. And that's a slap in God's face, and you think, I mean, I told Jack the other night, I said, I feel like just going up and slapping some of them people in the face and saying, well, wake up,
Yeah.
It's just, it's so hard because basically it's slapping God in the face.
Yeah.
Of that. And we're praying, we're trying, and it seems like there's a lot of people that's not praying enough, or either because it's overwhelming.
Well,
now it's like 40, it was 47%. Now it's up 90%.
A lot of people think, well, because of the fact that, I've got to be loving, and that loving means they equate loving with accepting. And you can love somebody and not accept their sin.
Right.
And that's an issue. So
yeah, and just like these, what Moses said, they don't look.
Yeah.
And then that's defacing our God.
Yeah, it's shaming him. Yeah.
Before us and him.
Yeah.
Him the most because he's God and we know it.
Yeah. In verse 32, chapter 14, 32, look what it says, the whole generation here. But your carcasses will fall in this desert. You and your children will wander about the desert for 40 years, bearing the consequences of your prostitutions until the desert eats up your carcasses. Remember what they said about the land, that the land devoured them? Though the desert is going to end up devouring them. And it says, it will be a year for every day you spent spying the land, that you will bear the consequences of your offenses. 40 days, 40 years, and then you will know that what it means to oppose me. So they were judged one day for each year for searching out the land. And two, another way to look at it, well, there were 10 spies with a negative report. So that's 4 years for each spy, and 4 we know is the dalet, the door. And then so 4 times 10. So each man basically became a door. And so you've got each man is basically became a door to judgment here, because the hand of Yah's judgment, 10 Yud, was upon them. So,
and two, the difficulty is in that 40 years, how many of the children were really brought up with the word of God, and everything that was going to.
Yeah, they were the only ones. Yeah.
And I'll take your children, the ones you said.
Yeah. Yep.
And he said, I'll take them. But, when, I always said, how many went in,
Yeah, well, they were,
believe.
they were under 20, the ones that were under 20. They could go.
Most of the ones that were born in the wilderness.
The ones who were born in the wilderness too. Yeah.
Because remember the cloud.
A lot of it, yeah. In verse 36, it says the men whom Moshe had sent to spy out the land, who, when they returned, they made the entire community complain against him by giving an unfavorable report about the land. Those men who gave the unfavorable report about the land died by a plague in the presence of Yah. So those 10 were immediately killed with a plague.
Well,
and then
that we gotta be careful.
What we speak.
Report.
Yeah, the report. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's just saying no matter what it is. Yeah. Yeah. What report you're speaking is that, because.
You all that before it all happened. But how it worked out, there was 10 men, 10 plagues. all
The judgment, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's all, connected.
And then two, you think about, that whole generation dies because they didn't bring back life. They brought back that evil report. And because they failed to, they're basically failing to bring his word into that situation because they are they're a walking ark. They're to carry his word, and they were to carry the word, and they failed to do that. So they,
Well, you can look at it this way, the 10 brought death on us.
on the whole generation. Yeah.
Mhm.
The 10 brought the death on the whole generation. So think about that. How it was the sin of a few that infected the whole congregation and caused it. That's why when you think about, we don't like to think about that Yom Kippur is not about individual salvation. Yom Kippur is about national salvation. That's why you can have righteous people living in a nation that is coming under the judgment.
Listen, what would have happened during COVID in Israel if Israel prayed to God and said, no vaccines,
I don't know.
no
Yeah.
vaccines?
Yeah.
We believe in you, oh God, and we trust in you, oh God, and cry out, because God says, as a nation,
Yeah.
as a government, what they do,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I'll honor, that's what I'll do. When we were there the last time in Israel, remember some rockets were coming. We actually heard one of the rockets that fell short.
Yeah.
And we said,
Yeah.
we didn't have
Bomb
any
shelter,
place to go, bomb shelter. But I told you, I said, I'm honestly, I'm just trusting in God that I'm not worried about it. I like that. Went to sleep because I said, God, that's up to you.
Yeah.
I'm what would you, people look at you, would you just stupid and crazy? But is that trusting God or is that being done?
Yeah.
Yeah. God says, trust me. Does he say run or trust me? I guess
and that's the thing too. We think about that. A lot of times we want to just think about individual salvation, but there is also a national salvation. So, okay. So
I was telling Jack last week when we had that real bad storm, I don't know if y'all had it here. We had high winds, boy. I mean, the house was lashing. I mean, the trees were popping. And I was already in bed because it was late. And I was letting her listen to it. And I said, Lord, I trust in your word. And I said, Yeshua, I said, you told the wind, peace be still.
Yeah.
And I said, you can do that right now.
Yeah.
What? And 5 minutes later, everything just stopped.
Yep.
Died, stopped completely.
Well,
Rain and wind, everything. The trees popping. I thought, oh, we're gonna have to. But then I said, no.
When we first bought that place, the house,
Yeah.
We dedicated.
We did. We drove.
Yeah.
And each time we have a bad storm, I said,
We
well,
cried.
yes,
Well,
well,
if
Yeah.
you're in a
That's it.
storm, it could be raging.
Yeah.
And where
Yeah,
you're at,
else.
it can be
Yeah.
safe.
Yeah. That's true.
Regardless.
But when I prayed, I said, Lord, we dedicate this home to you. And I said, I look to you to protect it.
And
Yeah.
it wasn't 5 minutes. I told Jack the next morning, I said, did you hear the storm? He said, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you even heard it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was whipping. I mean, the back of the house, everything was bounding and everything. And that's when I said it. And 5 minutes later, it was
It
nothing.
stopped.
It just quit. The storm went on over. And I said, thank you. I thank it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the parsha began with spying out the land, and it actually ends with spying, that word spying. Because if we go to Numbers chapter 15, I'm going to go ahead and skip over to 15, and I'm going to go down to verse 38. And it says, speak to the people of Israel, instructing them to make through all of their generations zizot, on the corners of their garments, and to put the tzitzits on each corner with a blue thread. It is to be a tzitzit for you to look at and thereby remember all of Yah's mitzvot and obey them, so that you won't go around wherever your own heart and eyes lead you to prostitute yourselves. That has the word spying in it. the same word that we used at the beginning. It's actually in the phrase. So you won't go around wherever your own heart and eyes lead you to prostitute yourself. That where it says, so you won't go around, that is the word for spy, that tur. Okay. So the zitzit is actually the remedy for having bad vision or sinful vision. Because when you look at the zitzits, they are there to remind you not to go by the way of your eyes. So the zitziot are the first mitzvah which a young boy at the age of 3 is introduced to. And because this mitzvah is related to the eyes, which of course they say because, even linking it back to Adam's downfall, that, the woman saw that the fruit was good and ate of it. That, they link it back. It's always about the eyes here. And the blue thread is actually called Tekhlet. And, I read something interesting on the Tekhlet that 2 Belgium scientists, and I'll put this in the link, that 2 Belgium scientists, J. Wouters and A. Verhecken, studied the property of different dye molecules that were obtained because the blue comes from the Murex trunculus snail. And remember, this was a snail that was found in the Mediterranean and then it disappeared, and then now it's come back. And it takes a lot of these snails to make just a little bit of this dye. So they discovered that this dye, the blue, the Tekhlet molecule is an indigetin. I don't know how you say that. And it gets its color from this strong absorption peak. And that when they looked at the color Tekhlet, that when they looked at it on the spectrum, that on the spectrum, it was exactly 613 nanometers. And so think about on 613, the 613 commands, because what is this blue supposed to do? It's supposed to remind you of the word of Yah. And I also saw teaching from the Chabad Rebbetzin Rivka Sarai, who was the only kosher linen Tekhlet retailer. And one of the things that they said, that she said, was that anciently each tribe had its own way of tying the knot patterns so that you could look at a person's zitzit to determine what tribe they were from. However, this has been lost to history. And so since even, the Yehuda's tribe pattern is no longer known, they don't really know how to tie them. They've settled on a 10-5-6-5 pattern because they patterned it after Yud Hey Vav Hey, because Yod is the 10, Hey is the 5, the Vav is the 6, and the Hey is the 5. So they've got that 10-5-6-5 pattern is the way that they tie it. So, regardless of however you tie the knots, the Tekhlet cover is to remind them. That blue is to remind them of Yah's commands. And it's interesting that that's exactly 613 nanometers on the spectrum. So, and if we think about how all of this applies to us today, that we need to be looking with our spiritual eyes and not our physical eyes. In Hebrews 3, it says in verse 12, watch out, brothers, so that there will not be in any one of you an evil heart, lacking trust, which could lead you to apostatize from the living God. Instead, keep exhorting each other every day, as long as it is called today, so that none of you will become hard-hearted by the deceit of sin. For we've all become sharers in the Messiah, provided that we will hold firmly to the conviction which we began right through until the goal is reached. Now where it says, today, if you will hear Elohim's voice, don't harden your hearts as you did in the bitter quarrel, who were the people who, after they heard, quarreled so bitterly. All of those whom Moshe brought out of Egypt, and with whom was God disgusted for 40 years. Those who sinned, yes, they fell dead in the wilderness, and to whom was that he swore that they would not enter into his rest. Those were the ones who were disobedient, So we see that they were unable to enter because of their lack of trust. So part of that remedy that Yah gives us is so that we can focus on him and not the word is the zizis. And as we're touring and spying out the land, we've got to remember whose word or seed do we have within. And, I found it interesting that Rashi had some interesting comments that I'll link in here, because Rashi said this, that the heart and the eyes are the spies of the body.
Mhm.
And they act as the body's agents in sinning. The eye sees and the heart desires, and the body carries out the sin. And I think that fits right in with that passage there. So, also that word tour for spying is tav, vav, resh, and it has the same three letters as Torah. If we just add the hay to it at the end, we've got Torah. And we know that the hay represents being fruitful, because remember when Yah added the hay to Abram's name, he says, you are going to be a father, but now you're going to be a father of many. You're going to be fruitful. So he added that hay to their name. So again, it is about being fruitful and his word. Now, one other thing I wanted to go back to is that word tour, is that, just like the spies had to tour the land, if they had toured the land and heard his report, they would have been fruitful, and they would have had that hay added to them, and they would have found a resting place for the Torah. Just like in the garden, Adam and Eve took of the wrong fruit, and instead of spying out the word of Yah, they spied out the wrong word. So they were sent out. They were shalach. And if we go back to that word tour, we could also see that it has the word in it, because remember, that's where Yah calls Abraham from, is of Kasdim. And is where he had to leave. And Abraham was called a Hebrew, an Ivri, which means to cross over. So he had to cross over the water, or the mem, which is 40. And also means light or flame. So we have to leave the light or the flame of the wrong fruit, just as Abraham. And then we'll have the hay added to us. So just as in the garden, we had two trees or two fruits. It's the same pattern concerning the land. The bride's going to be tested and will come again, and it depends on what fruit is she going to choose. And if we think about the connection to the land here, you remember I said at the beginning that men are referred to as trees in Psalms 1. And trees are to be rooted and and they're rooted and connected to the physical land. And the deeper the roots are in the land, the stronger the tree is.
So when we said Yeshua is our Redeemer, we crossing over.
Right, we're crossing over. And to think about, but we must not forget to be rooted not only in, Yeshua is the trunk, but they're rooted in the land. Mm-hmm. And again, this made me think about Joshua and Caleb, because they were the two trees. They were the two that were rooted in the land and saw the, and that's why my background is the two trees here. And then think about too, that this is, maybe think of this last verse in Zechariah 4 and verse 11, when Zechariah has this vision and he says, I replied by asking him, what are these two olive trees on the right and on the left sides of the menorah? Mm-hmm. And then I asked the question again, what are these two olive branches that are discharging gold oil through these two gold spouts? And he replied, don't you know what they are? And I answered, no, my Lord. And he said, these are the two who have been anointed with oil. They are standing with the Lord for all of the land. So in the midst of the war going on right now with Israel and Iran, we need to remember that connection to the land. Are we going to be like those two trees? Are we going to be the two that bring back that good report that actually have, I don't know if you can see there on my background, the oil in the center, that those two trees are doing. So that's what I had for today. You have something else? Y'all have anything to say or?
No.
Are we both wearing orange shoes?
We're twins.
We're twins. We are twins today. I just now realized that when I did the camera around, we both had on orange.
Twins.
We're twinsies. So we'll get ready for the blessing.
Pick it up, but she'll grab it. She's wild. She's a little rest.
Okay. Ready?
Just a second.
Okay.
All right, Jay. Yevireka ka Yahaba Bivrish Mereha. Yahir Yahava Penava Ileka Vehune ka. Yesa Yahava Pinavileka Vayashim Leka. Shalom. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face to shine on you and show you his favor. May Yahweh lift up his face toward you and give you peace. B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach. Shalom. Go in peace. Amen. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Amen. We pray, Debbie bless you and
You too.
love you and